Now, what you have seen so far regarding automation was all, arrangement based to, help your track progress, have some change, have some movement introduced, to the elements. But a really important thing about all of those is they actually could help you, ease these transitions, make them better, make them sound more pleasing, these transitions, make that change of energy, even more pleasant. And sometimes building up that suspense actually tells the listener that something is going to happen. There is also something we do want. So what we can do with all of those that you've seen, so all the filters and everything else, we could combine those effects. What we can also do is, let's say, on all of these break-ins, let's say right here. So we can do with these to ease up into this transition, into this build-up. So let's hear what do we have in the break and what we have in the build-up. You see, it stops right there. Maybe I'd like a better transition between these two. So from this break into this build-up. Now, what can I do with that? Let's say I could add some reverb. So everything goes into the reverb. What that's going to do is going to, push all of these elements away from us into the distance. Now, I'm not using this reverb right here as, an illusion of space, as an ambience kind of, soundstage design, as in production, as these are, to give space to the elements, to actually position them in the soundstage further and closer, to the listener. What I want to do is like a special effect using this reverb right here. So I'm going to do that by hand first. I want a longer reverb, that's for sure, and with more highs, like right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate eventually this dry wet parameter right here. So let's see what that sounds like. Let's say somewhere from the beginning. So we could actually do that, automate that reverb. Now you see that dry wet parameter right here. I could automate it up and down right there, make a new lane for it, do that. Now I'm not going to do that for a certain reason. First of all, I like to use macros. I'm going to Control G, group this one, or you can also, right click and group it. And I'm going to map that dry wet to macro 1. Now, why I'm mapping this? Well, maybe I want another, effect along with this one. So let's say maybe some redux. Together with that, I'm going to place the redux before. Okay, that's good. I'm going to use the soft one. Now I'm going to map this to this macro right here. Now I'm going to use less maximum out of that. Just make it move a tiny bit. Just like that. Okay, done. Now both of these are moving at the same time. Okay. And just by even not listening, I can do that and let's say add an auto filter. Let's say I add that auto filter in between those two, like this. I'm going to make it a high pass, like that. Nice. Okay, so I'm going to map that to macro 1. Now, you see, as I'm going upwards with more reverb and bit reduction, actually downsampling, I'm going further away out, filtering out. Of course, I don't want to go completely out with the filter, so I'm going to go to the map and make the maximum of this filter somewhere around there, around 4K. Now I'm doing this unseen because I can, suggestively guess what kind of frequencies are in these instruments. These are leads. So there is going to be information left after 4K, but just enough to produce some reverberation because I do need some of this sound to be left there so you can produce some reverb, so you can feed the reverb with something to create a reverb out of. Now all of those are mapped to this macro. So let's see how does that sound now as a transition. That's nice. So we have 3 of those happening at the same time. Now this is one of the reasons you might want to use macros even when it's only one effect, because it's going to be easy to add another one and map it right there. So now that this is done, I have this parameter. I can click on the plus right here and go upwards, and after that go downwards. Done. Go maximum, minimum, doesn't really matter. I can go all the way maximum, all the way minimum, and by the time that's done, I can also play with the plus, and minus, so I can play with the minimum, maximum of all of those in case I wanted to, so nothing is fixed. I don't have to touch my automation anymore. So I made my automation, it's done. Now I can play with, the movement of these, how much I want them to move. Maybe I want more of this, bit reduction. And I just have to do that and it's done. I don't have to touch the automation. It's right where it needs to be. So the transition needs to happen right there. I can also, let's say, do this. Let this, whole of these melodies start unfiltered and then they slowly get into it. I can even click Alt, pull this down, create a curvature on this actual automation and do the opposite right here. So let's see what that sounds like. Now, one thing I would like is to have this riser right there. This. Yeah, I'd like that sound actually excluded from all of these effectings. So I'm gonna move that into another group, into drop synths, because it does happen on the drops a lot. So let's see what that sounds like if that comes in, dry. So from, let's say, right here. These sounds a bit too loud, but you catch the drift. So this is what I did. Now, let's say at some point I change my mind, like tomorrow. I don't like the reverberation, but I like the filter. All I need to do is this. They still stay automated. I don't need to redraw anything. Still stays the same. It's just no reverb happening. It's just the filter and the bit reduction. Maybe I like that even more. So that's thinning out, you see, high passing everything, so thinning out effect. This way we're removing a lot of the low end frequencies which actually, give almost all of the energy to the sound. By removing that energy, we're preparing the listener for this part right here, which is going to have an abundance of energy in the low frequencies in the entire sound, actually. So by thinning out, we are preparing them to have, this impact sound even more powerful. Now, of course, you can do any of these alone, or you can combine them. Combine the thinning out with the high pass, together with the reverb, with some redux, maybe without it, by just turning it off, or maybe adding even more effects, to add more to this entire conundrum of what's happening. Maybe, let's say, the grain delay, something like this. I'm going to add that after the filter, before the reverb. I could add it anywhere and then just swap their positions. You see, even when they're being connected to the macro, I can still, map them out and then still, change the positions of where they actually are in the entire chain. So I'm going to leave everything just as it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to map this to the macro 1, same time, like that, and maybe even the delay time, right here, this thing. So I'm going to map that to macro 1. Of course, I don't want it to go too far up. Let me see, redux, auto filter, grain delay, time delay, not so much. Something like this, okay? Cool, done. Now maybe feedback too. I can do the feedback as well. And let me just map that out too. I don't want the feedback to go out of hand with too much. So let's say just like this. That's it. So let's see what that sounds like now, but we have all of that happening. You see, that's what happens with them now. If I exclude the reverb, I can even use only those two. By the extension of this, I could save this rack as my, let's say, ultimate modulation box. And let me just re-enable that automation and then reuse it in other projects, and maybe not use all of these effects. Maybe in the other projects you want to disable the reverb. So I could have all of these in there just like this by double clicking here on the name, just minimize them. And then in another song, when I pull it in, I could save it like this and say effects, transitional FX, like this, and I could pull it in anywhere and then just maybe disable 2 of those or 3 of those, just leave 1 or leave 3 or leave whatever. So I could reuse this very easy, and everything is already mapped to macro and everything already sounds nice. When you go minimum to maximum, when they're all on, when they're not all on, this really makes it easier for you to create music and to stay in the moment of the inspiration. When you have an idea, you just want to do something fast, you just want to, have an effect that's going to create this transitional, hype. And you can just use something like this, create your own racks with a lot of effects that are going to do many things at once that you can actually disable very easy. Just, slam that on there, automate this macro real fast, done. And this is going to help you, stay in the creative moment while creating all of these transitional effects. So you don't have to do this every time. And this is one of the good things of, digital technology, because we can actually save any of the things that we have in our digital workstations. And that doesn't just mean these, groups of effects. Whatever you want, you can save. But this is one of the really cool things that you can create a rack of your own that's filled with effects and maybe even more controls right here, and then just use it and reuse it, and it can sound different every time, since I could disable the reverb and it's going to sound quite different. This way you can see that automation and automating effects just like this and parameters can help your arrangement reach that finesse of transition, of energy, cohesion when transferring from one piece to the other. So from one part of the song to the other part of the song, and make everything, drop in seamlessly. So you can see that effects like this and automation applied to them can be a really powerful tool in creating an arrangement and, taking care of that energy and cohesion within the entire song. Now, the last thing would be just to hear this song and see what we have done on this song so far and how does it sound. So there you have it. I hope this is something you would like to hear in a club maybe. Till the next course.